Welcome back to Spawn Control, where I'll take you through all the best routes and positions that'll have you anchoring spawns for every occupy zone on every map in XDefiant. I'm SteXD, and today we're on Echelon HQ, so let's get to it. First, let's go over Echelon spawns, which are for the most part super simple. You've got the two home spawns for each team in Control and Lobby, but when we're at either P3 or P5, that home spawn on the other side of the map will get pushed up more to the middle of the map so that the attacking team doesn't have to run all the way across the map every time they die. When we look at the P2 and P4 zones, typically the defenders are going to be spawning behind it and the attackers in front of it. We'll get into routes that help change that later on. Now, with how Echelon zones are set up, when playing rotations properly, you can chain holds from one zone to the next really easily compared to other Occupy maps. When looking at the rotations, it's easy to see why. Going into each zone, first we've got servers, then reads into Control, and then chairs into Lobby. As you can probably tell, P2 into P3 and P4 into P5 are both chainable if you're anchoring optimal spawns for your team the whole time. This is going to force players to have to take their time and be more methodical on their breaks and spawn flips, because if you do everything right, you could run up 120 points straight with either of these chains. This will lead to some really interesting matches competitively, with a stark gameplay difference compared to other Occupy maps. Other major callouts around the map are Red and Blue, Connector, S1 and S2, Catwalk, Back Office, Front Crates, Conference, and Planning. If there's any other good callouts for Echelon HQ that I missed, drop them down below in the comments. Also guys, we just passed 700 subs last week, so thanks to all you guys out there for motivating me to put these videos out. And a special shout out to subscriber number 441, Stormtrooper. Thanks for the kind comment, man. If you want a special shout out in the next video, subscribe and drop your sub number in the comments below. And check out the channel for more spawn control videos, faction guides, weapon overviews, shorts, and more. But for now, let's get into Echelon. Starting from bad side, you already know I'm going to be working to flip spawns for P2, but I want to help my team a little bit on the zone first. Typically, I want to play our side mid, waiting for an enemy to push up one of the mid lanes to try and flank the zone. I can check inside the zone every now and then too, but my main priority is to try to stay alive around Connector and eventually try to make my way to the P2 catwalk. Going into P2, even if the enemy's still spawning in the back, being up in top cat makes it really hard for them to push into your team, even when they have favorable zones. You're able to patrol back and forth and help the front and inside the zone from a bunch of good angles too. This is the ideal aggressive AR spot, but you can't fully stop the enemy from flanking from mid and taking office and control side spawns from you entirely. I'll give you guys a bit of insight into these P2 spawns. If your team is in control of P2 and you die and spawn back offices, it means your team has good enough control for you to make it back up to top cat for free. If you die and spawn farther back in control somewhere, take that as a warning that the enemy's started to push out past P2 and you'll likely have to battle your way back to the point. This is why playing from office and spawning your teammates here is crucial for holding P2. It turns pushing P2 from the front into a swimming upstream situation for the enemy team. If you're trying to break P2, getting to the planning area can get your team spawning in a better spot to attack P2 or even just to get set up for P3. Now when it comes to P3, I really think you can do it well from both sides of the zone. If your team just got smacked at P2, the enemy chaining P2 to P3 is a very real possibility if they play it right. But you can make your rebuttal and lock down P3 from planning side pretty well too. From either side, I'll typically like to control the top crates area. This is where the real fight for the zone is, because controlling top crates forces the enemy to funnel through their side entrance. Losing control of top crates means the enemy is going to start swarming the zone from everywhere, and a break is probably inevitable. Going into P4 to really secure spawns, just play this back heady, and then you've got the entire flank covered. The enemy's gonna have to push all the way around the back to catch you off guard, and challenging you from the front is a tough fight for them to win. It's camping with style. It's really that simple. You help your team so much from this back heady by anchoring spawns and covering the flank. You really don't have to move from this spot until it's time for the next zone. And even then, this window heady's a solid spot for P5 too. Over at P5, spawns can get hectic, with both teams spawning right next to each other if your team doesn't have complete control of the entire lobby area. If I'm at P5 early, I usually expect the enemies to push from the old zone and mid, and typically my teammates will be hovering around that area, so I like to play over by this statue so I can give them some help if the enemy does push through. But I can also shift and cover the push from conference in case they decide to work this way instead. Especially when you pair this spot with some shock wire, you can really delay the enemy's push. When I'm pushing to break P5, I really don't don't like pushing through old and having to deal with a player watching from that heady. It's such a good spot that if a player finesses well, they can waste a lot of your time and probably just get you killed by his teammates. I'll typically like to push from conference, but really if the enemy's set up in the zone, it's hard to find openings anywhere, and flipping spawns without getting focused by multiple players seems impossible. This zone takes teamwork to break, so if you're a solo anchor trying to do your part, just wait for your team to go in firing from one way and then you enter in from a different angle and use the chaos to your advantage. Once you're in the P5 lobby area, you gotta be constantly moving and using the cover around this otherwise wide open area to get a chance to break this zone. It's tough, and the real solution to breaking P5 is just to be there first and never have to break it in the first place. Alright, that's Echelon HQ, a close quarters absolute bang out of a map. I love this map for the action it creates, but it can be frustrating for sure too, especially when you have an AR on this map against a bunch of cracked SMG players. When I'm using an AR on Echelon, I try to use every line of sight I can to create long-ranged engagements while trying to always be ready for and aware of any close quarters engagements that'll put me in trouble. It's easier said than done, but to keep the yap to a minimum, if you're running an AR, don't be afraid to really slow down every now and then. Getting caught sprinting is usually instant death against a good SMG user on this map. I really enjoy making these videos because, believe it or not, it's really helped improve my game sense too. I had a good idea of XDefiant spawns before I started this series, but now I feel like I really understand them. Anyways, that's enough yapping. Goodbye!